Welcome to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Main, awesome wife and dog mom for life. I'm a sex therapist turned sex coach, and I run a successful business selling relationship enhancement products. I absolutely love talking about all things sex. So you can expect this podcast to explore all things related to women's sexual health because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you discover and embrace what brings you pleasure so that you can own your sexual self. If that sounds good to you, then keep listening and let's fucking do this. Oh my gosh, y'all. Welcome back for another episode of Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. Wow. All right. Today's guest is literally, you guys, this interview is about to blow your damn minds. It is so good. I mean, starting even off with like the accent first. If you're anybody like me, like you are such a sucker for people with accents. And our guest today, Cam Fraser, is all the way from Australia. So you're in for a real treat hearing this interview that we did together. Cam is a certified professional sex coach. He's a certified sexologist, a registered counselor, and a registered tantric yoga teacher. I mean, talk about doing it all, right? All within that same sphere of sexual health. And his work integrates scientifically validated, medically accurate information about sexual health with sacred sexuality teachings from the mystery traditions. I love the woo vibe of that. And as a coach, he specifically helps men go beyond surface level sex and into full-bodied, self-expressed, pleasure-oriented sexual experiences free of anxiety and shame. How amazing is that? What a different twist to have him on the podcast today. And to be speaking specific, oh my gosh, can I talk? Speaking specifically about men's sexuality. We're going to be speaking specifically about masculinity and male sexuality and really busting myths around all of these different sort of things. So again, you can find Cam Fraser. I didn't mention this yet, but you can find him on Instagram at the Cam Fraser. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes, of course. But I'm telling you guys, this is going to be so good. So continue listening. Of course, shoot us any of the DMs that you want. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Reach out to Cam, reach out to myself, and yeah, just share all the goodness, of course. All right, continue listening. How did you get into this work?
Yeah, I suppose there's kind of like the professional reasons that I got into this work and also the personal reasons that I got into this work. And like professionally speaking, like I've always been interested in like psychology and counseling and mental health. And I've also like always kind of been interested in sexuality and human sexual behavior and spirituality as well. And I blend a bit of spirituality into my work. And so I always had a desire. I actually wanted to go down like the clinical therapy route. Mm-hmm. And the more I studied like to pursue that, the more I realized, wow, talk therapy is amazing, but quite limited. Yes. And, I wanted to do yoga and, Tantra and massage and all these other really incredible modalities, which if I went into clinical therapy, I wouldn't really be able to draw from. Mm-hmm. Just because of the way that clinical therapy set up, you can't really do that. So I got into coaching, and coaching for me just allowed me to draw from a wider range of modalities, and that's been really I found that really valuable mm-hmm. in terms of like getting into the work that I do with men specifically as well. So that's kind of like the professional reason. I've just kind of always had an interest in, and I always wanted to go down this route, and then coaching just kind of fell in my lap, and I was like, wow, this is like a really beautiful way to pursue what I'm really passionate about. The personal reason though, and this is probably like the more impactful reason for why I got into this, was like my own journey with sexuality. Mm-hmm. When I was a younger man, my late teens, I moved to America, as I was saying before, and I went to university over there to study psychology, but also to be a student athlete. And I was just part of that locker room culture, I suppose, right? I was part of that, like, the term toxic masculinity probably is apt to be used with regards to that kind of culture. But it was just like me, I felt like I was pretending to be this guy that I kind of wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
but in order to fit in and in order to like not be bullied and in order to just kind of like be one of the boys, I kind of wore this mask of like what I thought was expected of me as a man. So that caused a lot of like mental health issues. Like I was quite anxious. I was quite insecure. That the way that I kind of compensated for that was with a lot of alcohol. The way that I fit in was like just ham up my Australianness and just be like the larrikin Australian guy who just drinks a lot. And so that really impacted my sex life, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol and sex, they mix in small quantities, but not in large quantities. So I ended up suffering from like a lot of alcohol-induced erectile dysfunction. And then because I was quite anxious as well, and because I was just like felt like I was pretending and not being this like authentic version of myself. That anxiety manifested as like premature ejaculation, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I was just really disconnected from the young women I was being sexual with. I was turning to porn quite a lot at that age of my life, and just like all around not a great space to be in mental health wise and like sexual health wise as well, I suppose. And there's more with regards to booze as well. Like I would blame the alcohol. So alcohol became a bit of a crutch for me with regards to like sex. I could just, if I just got fucked up, I then could just blame the alcohol if the sex was shitty.
Yeah.
And so that became a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And so like I guess like long story short, silver lining with all this was like I actually seriously injured my back. I actually fractured my spine and was introduced to like through my rehabilitation to clinical Pilates and to yoga, and through yoga to meditation and breath work and all these other really beautiful modalities which I incorporate into my work now. And it was like for the first time ever during like yoga and Pilates, I'd actually listened to my body. I actually slowed down, like dropped my breath into my diaphragm, paid attention to how I was feeling physically, and all these emotions started coming up. I was not only healing my body, but I was also starting to like process things that I hadn't processed before. There was, times halfway through a yoga class that I would just burst out into tears, or halfway through a Pilates class trying to hold a particular posture, which I couldn't do because my back was so sore. And I would just like have all this rage come up and, this huge overreaction of anger, because I couldn't do this particular thing. And so I was like, I can't just go around emotionally exploding every time I go to a class. So I need to go and do something about this. And so I went and saw the counselor, and the counselor put me in touch with a psychologist. And I just learned like emotional regulation tools. I just like learned where my emotions come from, what I can do about them, how they're linked to like all these stories and narratives that I have around masculinity and sexuality. And so I just started doing the work. I just started like, I just went to therapy essentially. And it kind of really helped unpack all these expectations and assumptions that I have about like what it means to be a man and what it means to be a sexual man in particular. And so I was doing that work combined with like the body work side of things as well, the yoga and the Pilates, and just like healing my body. And I just noticed how much like better I was getting. Like I noticed the sex that I was having was better. I wasn't having any of the same issues. I was more confident in asking my partners what it is that they liked and actually talking about sex and just being more interested and curious about my body and their bodies, and like started speaking up and speaking out against some of the guys in the locker room because I was like, fucking, what are they doing? And felt more confident in myself and started just like in the best possible way, not really giving a fuck, right? Like not caring what these other guys thought about me and not caring if I made a fool of myself in the bedroom, and just kind of being a lot more open and being a lot more honest and authentic in just the way that I showed up in life. And that was like 12 years ago, I guess. And so from there, I've just kind of pursued sexuality and spirituality and tried to bring those two things together in the work that I do at the moment. It's like my philosophy today is everything that I put out into the world, all the content that I create, is stuff that I wish I heard 10, 12, 15 years ago. I try and speak to a younger version of myself, and that seems to resonate with people, which is really cool because I feel like people are, especially men, kind of have similar experiences. And I was just, like I said, very fortunate that from like a serious injury, which I thought was going to be like really detrimental to me, ended up being like, there was a lot of gold in it. And that's kind of what put me onto what I'm doing today. So, I suppose in as much of a nutshell as possible, that's kind of like the reason why I do the work.
Yeah. And I feel myself like getting tearful, even just hearing your story, because there's so many things that you just said that people can relate to, no matter what gender they identify with. And, and that locker room talk, I think even as a woman, we experience that too, but it's more in the terms of, slut shaming and things like that. But it's such a different dynamic for men versus women because, I was watching a video that you did recently about oral sex in particular, and your thoughts and the conversations that were happening specifically around giving and receiving blowjobs. And it was just so eye-opening because, like you said, you went through this time of your life where you were hearing other people's things, their beliefs were getting pushed on you. That was causing you your own shame within your sexuality. And it's almost as if these people in our life are who shape the sexual people that we are. And it isn't until, let's say, something traumatic happens in your life, or you finally get to that breaking point, that you realize, or you hear something and realize that it can be different. You can decide to want and be somebody different if that's what is what you're wanting for yourself. And how, you also use the word toxic masculinity, which I'd love to talk about, a little bit in deeper, because that is such a prominent thing in our society, especially, I'm not sure how it is in Australia, but especially in the States, So yeah, what was that like? You said that you kind of got razzed a bit from the guys in the locker room after you started doing this work, and you had this kind of no fucks given attitude. How did they adapt to that different change in you?
I'll be honest with you. I lost a good portion of my friend group. My kind of life took a bit of a different trajectory, I suppose, and so like the friends that I have now in the last 5 years were like people that I didn't know back when I was in that part of my life, and the people that I knew in that part of my life, I don't really talk to too much anymore. I know that they follow me online because I kind of see every now and again them pop up. But for the most part, we've just gone in different directions, which, I think if I like reflect on this, like I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of men are afraid of doing like the work or any work or just being a bit more open is firstly because they'll get most of the time like ridiculed and bullied and harassed and like ostracized by their friend group, because a lot of guys kind of still have that mindset of like, oh, you're a bit of a weirdo or a bit of a loser if you're doing some sort of personal development or you're talking about sex or whatever. And then also because like that it's a very real possibility that you'll lose a couple of friends and they won't want to kind of hang out with you anymore. I found that was especially true when I stopped drinking as much, especially here in Australia. A lot of male friendships are built on alcohol, and if you want to hang out, it involves going out and drinking. Because I stopped doing that as much, and I spent a whole year sober as well. Like that shifted my friendships, and so like I think that's important to acknowledge. Because there's a period of loneliness as well, of like not really knowing, who my friends are and having to make new friends and kind of having to connect with new people in your life. And that's a pretty scary thing to do. So I think like that's one of the hindrances, one of the resistances that men have to kind of doing this is like going on that journey essentially of like losing one friend group and gaining another, which can take a bit of time. And there's a period of loneliness in between that. So, that was, so to answer your question, that's kind of how they dealt with it was, they stopped hanging out with me, which was totally fine because now I've got a beautiful friend group and I wouldn't change that for the world. But like, I guess like with regards to talking like more openly and being more open about sexuality as well, like that's something that I came to that through desperation, right? Like I kind of hit, I don't want to say rock bottom. I was definitely not rock bottom, but it was like, I had really hurt myself, physically, and I was in a pretty bad space. And so like I seeked change and transformation from that space of desperation. And the other way that we can make change, or the other kind of motivating factor for change, is inspiration, right? Like we get so inspired by something, like, oh my God, I want to change this because I see this person doing this thing and I feel really inspired and I want to do something about this. I want to kind of be better. And like, that's kind of what I want to try and do, is I want to try and, minimize the amount of people that are having to change from that space of desperation, because when you get to that space, like, it's probably because you've done some pretty shitty stuff, right? You've probably crossed some boundaries. You've probably had some bad experiences. There's probably some trauma there. And it's like the like, one of the things I try and do with my work is to maybe reach people before they get to that space as well, and try and, like, educate and encourage people to, like, make change from that space of inspiration by saying, like, hey, look what's possible. Because I think there's a lot of narratives around, like, what you shouldn't do as, like, I mean, I speak from my own personal experience as a man. There's a lot of stories in society of, like, what men shouldn't do and what's unhealthy, and the way they've been showing up is, like, rightfully being called out. But there's not a lot of stories around, like, hey, here's what you can do. Like, here's a positive way of showing your sexuality. Here's, like, a really beautiful way of, like, expressing your sexual self and, exploring these parts of yourself. And, like, there's no examples of that. There's no, like, prominent models of that, I suppose, or if they are, they're few and far between. And so, like, that's what I think is really important, is to, like, offer that narrative, is to, like, offer that alternative to, and the way that I'm getting there is to talk about toxic masculinity, essentially. Yes. It's like there's a lot of portrayals of, like, really unhealthy representations of masculinity. And what I want to try and do with my work is, like, offer another expression of masculinity, because I don't think masculinity is a monolith. I don't think there's just one masculinity. I think there is a multitude of masculinities in the plural, and I think we can choose, and we can explore, and we can figure out, like, what it is, like, what fits for us, what's right for us, what's unique for us, and explore that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is, like, show that there are other ways of expressing your sexuality as a man that are healthy and beneficial and positive, and have a I guess, like, have a really positive impact on the people around you as well. Like, if you model, like, your sexuality in a really healthy way, that rubs off on people. It has a healing effect on people, not only on your friends, but also on a lot of women. A lot of guys don't realize, like, if they're, like, showing integrity and honesty and authenticity with their sexual expression and just how they kind of show up, like, that's really helpful for a lot of women to see that there's positive, men in the world, I suppose. And, and that's, I'm really humbled to kind of get that message pretty regularly online from women that kind of say that to me, which feels like the work that I'm doing is kind of resonating with people. So, I'll stop there, but, there's more about toxic masculinity that I'd love to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to touch too, when you had said, as you were going through this, beginning of this journey, and you were doing a lot of yoga and more embodiment practices, and you said that there was moments where you would just break down in anger or in tears, and as men, and society is telling you that you're not supposed to do those things. You're not supposed to become emotional. And I think from my perspective as a woman, when I see my own husband in those states, and when I see him doing that personal development, it's such a turn on, right? And I think at my younger age, before I started doing this work for myself, and maybe if I would see a partner doing that, I would be like, what are they doing? They're like, who is this person? And so I think it's when we ourselves start to do this work, and again, I know I have a lot of women that are listening to this that are on their own personal development or sexual development journeys that are struggling to kind of get their partners on board with them. So what would you say to somebody that does have a partner that they are trying to kind of tap into this more spiritual, sexual side of themselves and kind of work towards breaking down shame? How would you maybe have that conversation with a partner?
Yeah, the first thing I want to caution against is becoming your partner's coach or therapist, right? That's oftentimes I see a lot of women doing, like, amazing work on themselves. They're in a relationship with a man who's kind of lagging behind, or they feel like he's lagging behind. And so they get really eager to kind of help him along, to kind of catch up, essentially. And so they end up, like, coaching him. And, like, in some regards that can be okay, but, like, a dynamic that you don't want to fall into is a coach-client relationship rather than a partner or lover relationship, because it'll breed resentment and it's just not conducive for a healthy dynamic. So that's the first thing I want to be mindful of is like, if you're going to help him, like just be mindful of not stepping into that role and not wearing that hat. So in terms of encouraging him with regards to like going down this path or going on this journey, like, I guess one strategy straight up is just like share my work with him or share someone's work with him that like really resonates with you. Plenty of guys talking about guy shit online in a really beautiful, positive way. So like send those posts to him. I did a kind of call out on social media about how I can personally reach more men, and I got a lot of women saying, look, my husband doesn't follow you, he doesn't have an Instagram, he doesn't use social media, but I show him your work. And so I know it's a strategy. You can show him like either my stuff or someone else's stuff, and kind of prompt him, be like, hey, what do you kind of think about this? Or listen to a podcast together, right? Listen to or watch a documentary together, or something along those lines, where the kind of the invitation is there. It's not a command. It's like, hey, you need to do this. It's a, hey, what do you think about this? Well, and kind of stoke that curiosity. Hey, do you want to try this? Like, do you want to like have this, kind of take the seriousness out of it. That can be a strategy for like fostering that curiosity. If it's a demand, I suppose, or a command, it can oftentimes come across, especially for a lot of guys, as a bit of a blow to their ego. And in an ideal world, guys' egos wouldn't be so wrapped up in their in the way that they show up as a man. But unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, so it is. So coddling the male ego, unfortunately, has to be done sometimes. And obviously using discernment to do that. But like with regards to like sex, for example, like a lot of like women ask me like, what can I do to get my guy more interested in pleasure and trying new things and kind of exploring his sexuality a bit more and kind of tapping a bit more into his spirituality to have some deeper connection during sex. One of the things that I would suggest is, instead of saying to him like, the sex we're having is shit, you need to do this better, which I mean, I know some women that have done that, and it's kind of give their man a kick up the ass, and it has helped. But I feel like on the whole, a lot of guys would respond quite negatively to that because it's a blow to their ego. A lot of guys think that they're really great at sex, or think that if they're bad at sex, it means they're a failure as a man, right? So being mindful of that is really important. And so like the alternative way of, I suppose, broaching that subject is keeping it pleasure oriented and keeping it positively framed and saying like, hey, I'm really interested in exploring some more pleasure with you. The sex we're having is fine, it's great, but I actually want to explore some more, and I'd be really interested in trying this with you. I think we would have a really good time. And that lands a little bit nicer for a lot of guys. It softens the blow, so to speak. And I could keep going, but I think I'll stop there.
I honestly could talk to you for hours. Like, I know we talked a different time frame, and I know it's so late there, so there's so many. Yeah, I literally we could talk all day.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's say, when you do have men coming to work with you, what is really the majority of the themes that you see that are coming up for them around shame, and really then how do you work with them to kind of break that down?
So like shame shows up in a couple of different ways. So like the major topics that people ask me, like men ask me and want to do work with me around, is like your major ones, like any, I suppose, sex therapist will come up against these as well, is like premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, right? Or like performance anxiety, which is kind of interchangeable with erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. It's very much wrapped up in that. Or like just the sex that they're having is just not good, and they're not sure what to do about it, essentially. It's kind of the four major things that pop up, and then there's a lot of sub themes underneath that. But like But each one of those categories, like each one of those major kind of things, has a lot of shame wrapped up in it. A lot of guys are like, if they're coming quickly or before they're ready, before their partner is ready, then they feel like they're, in most cases, actually, in all of those cases, they feel like they're less of a man. They feel like, they're a failure. They feel like they've done something wrong, because the expectations that we have about, male sexuality and what it's supposed to be, like one of the, I talk a lot about like the myths of masculinity and male sexuality, and like this idea that, guys are supposed to have an erection at the flick of a switch and be able to pump away like a machine all night long, and then, ejaculate after several hours, after they've given their partner, multiple orgasms just by penetration. And then they're supposed to, and they're supposed to always have a high libido and all this sort of stuff. So, and all of that's just like this construction of masculinity, the social construction of masculinity that kind of comes from porn and mainstream movies and, social media and just people in general. And so that causes a lot of like anxiety for guys, because they feel like they can't live up to that. They feel like if they deviate from that very narrow way of being a sexual man, that something's wrong with them, and they feel a lot of shame about that. There's a lot of, again, a lot of ego involved in like what it means to be a man. And so they feel like there's, this role that they're supposed to play, which they can't. And because they can't, that means they're lesser than. I mean, there's a lot of self-worth that the self-worth takes a bit of a hit. So that's the kind of like in an overall sense, that's the way that kind of shame shows up. Is a lot of guys feel that shame because they feel like they're less than, and so there's a lot of comparing as well. A lot of guys compare themselves to what they think other guys are doing, and if only guys talked more about this openly, they would realize that, guys are comparing themselves to him as well, and that there's, just a lot of comparison going on, and a lot of guys, worrying about each other, not actually worrying about themselves. And it's like that same thing with penis size and things like that as well, and body image. So so it shows up in a lot of ways, but the kind of commonality, I suppose, is that like feeling of not being a man, essentially, is to boil it down to one phrase.
Yeah. And then they start working with you or another sex coach. And I think in many of our practices, it is doing, like we talked about, those embodiment practices, the breathing exercises, and really helping people get in tune with their body and really listening to what their body is trying to tell them. And I think that's the first step in kind of uncovering then where these, quote unquote challenges are coming up for them, and then, that's,
totally.
That's when,
I think like it's like in my own experience, like there's a lot of value in deconstructing the narratives and the stories and the expectations that we have around like masculinity and those myths. Like busting those myths is really helpful, and that's like there's an education piece there as well, and a normalization piece as well. Like I feel like 90% of my job is telling guys that they don't. It's not normal to have an erection for 4 hours straight, and the fluctuations in penis erection strength is totally fine, and that's totally normal. That's what you should expect from a human body, and just normalizing, their just normalizing their functionality, I suppose. But then there's also like the other side of it, which is, like the tools and the strategies and the techniques and the things that you can do to tap into your body and to release tension, right? And because anxiety in the mind manifests as tension in the body, and so can you breathe and relax? And I do a lot of work with the nervous system as well. So can you transition from like a sympathetic dominant position into a parasympathetic dominant position? And so there's a whole bunch more. But those I find it really helpful for the men that I work with to kind of have a nice balance between those two things. It's kind of the cognitive way of thinking about masculinity and kind of deconstructing that and busting a bunch of they might hold, and then also a bunch of practices to do as well. And I start off because guys are, at least in my experience anyway, they're not super into the woo-woo spirituality stuff. So I start off with like really mainstream, like physiotherapy type stuff. And then once the ball started to roll, then, and then things have started to change and dominoes have started to fall, then I start to introduce them to the more spiritual and esoteric and energetic things. But the foot in the door is like your more grounded, scientific, and I'll use specific language as well to kind of engage with guys at that level, because that's what resonates with them. And then from there, I start to layer in the more spiritual language, I suppose, to kind of get that deeper understanding, which is really beneficial, I find, as well. So yeah, you're right, and I think a balance between the two is really necessary.
And you mentioned too some common myths that you work through to bust with people, and I know that we've already touched on a few. Are there any that come to mind that we haven't talked about yet?
A major one is if a guy has an erection, it means that he's turned on, or that means that he's aroused. So there's such a thing as genital non-concordance, which is this idea that you can be turned on subjectively in the mind, but not turned on physically in the body, or maybe the body's playing catch up to the mind, or vice versa. You might be physically aroused, and the body might be responding to something, but you actually don't feel turned on subjectively. You're actually not aroused in your mind, and so like that discrepancy is actually it's larger in women, I suppose, and people that have a vulva, but it also occurs in people that have a penis. And men. And so like so that's the first thing to kind of be aware of, is that there is sometimes a disconnect. But also like, a guy, specifically like if we're talking erectile dysfunction, for example, or just guys that are having erectile disappointment, is that they, like a lot of guys are really actually aroused and turned on, but they maybe are anxious about performing, or they're anxious about what their penis looks like, or whatever it might be. That might just be in their head, and even though they're aroused, their body kind of isn't responding. It doesn't mean that they're not into you, or it doesn't mean that they're not wanting to have sex, for example, or it doesn't mean that they're not wanting to engage sexually with their partner. And if that is something that's popping up for people that are listening, a very simple thing that you can do is take your time, slow down, focus on touch. Bring your awareness to your fingertips. Notice on the sensations that you feel when you touch your partner, when you touch your own body. And oftentimes when you do that and you focus on the pleasure of those sensations and you slow down, the erection will just come back anyway. Just give yourself some time and some space to explore pleasure, and that pleasure will start to override that anxiety, and you'll start to notice the erection come back. But that's a big one, is like, he's lost at his erection, that means he's not attracted to me. It's not, he's not turned on. Another one is like ejaculation as well. We conflate ejaculation with orgasm. They're actually two separate physiological processes in the body. And that means guys can orgasm without ejaculating, and they can ejaculate without orgasming. And so this idea then is like, ejaculation is kind of like the be-all and end-all of the male sexual experience. This kind of 5-second sticky white crotch sneeze, which is like not the be-all and end-all. There's like so much more pleasure to experience, not only orgasmic pleasure, but just like pleasure in general. Guys, don't have to ejaculate, for example, when they're having sex. There's a whole conversation here around like not making orgasms the goal of sex as well, but there's ejaculation doesn't have to be present in order for the sex to be good. Right? That's a very common story that men and people that sleep with men have, is like, if he doesn't come, then it means he didn't enjoy himself. And so like that story can often get triggered very unconsciously if he's been drinking too much. Like this is true from my own experience. And maybe he just can't come because he's got whiskey dick or brewer's droop, or just had too much booze. And so that story can often get triggered for a lot of women who maybe are having sex with him and thinking, like, am I not attractive enough? Am I not hot enough? Does he not find me, good looking? Am I not doing the thing that he likes because he didn't come? And we've conflated his ejaculation with his pleasure, right? With his orgasm. So it's important to kind of detach those two. Sex can be really pleasurable, possibly even more pleasurable without an ejaculation involved or without an orgasm involved. So that's another big myth that I like to talk about. That I talk about libido. Guys aren't just DTF all the time. That's a myth as well. And that, the sex drives are actually a lot closer to one another than we might think. There isn't this huge discrepancy. Men want sex all the time. Women never want sex. That's a big one. And so I do a lot of talking around that. One of the simplest ways to bust that myth is to talk about hormones and testosterone, for example. All right, testosterone, we like to think, is linked to sex drive, which it is. It's not the only thing that's linked to sex drive, but for the most part, it kind of is. And the simplest way to kind of bust this myth, like I was saying, is testosterone isn't always high and unyielding and unwavering and at maximum capacity all the time. Testosterone fluctuates across the day, fluctuates across a 20-day and 30-day cycle. It fluctuates across the year as well, being high in the winter and low in the summer. And it fluctuates across the lifespan as well. So, if we're linking testosterone to sex drive and testosterone is fluctuating all over the place, then of course sex drive is going to fluctuate all over the place as well. So that's also important to acknowledge, is that guys don't just want to have sex all the time. And thinking that they do leads to some pretty, if we follow that logic, it leads to some pretty gross and harmful ideas about men men can't get sexually assaulted and things like that. Is where that logic essentially takes us. So like there's heaps more of that. Once you start unpacking masculinity, it's almost never ending. So, but those are the major ones, I suppose, as they relate to sexuality as well.
Yeah. And I had somebody on my Instagram feed ask specifically about prostate play. So any myths that you can think of related to men and prostate play.
Oh shit! Yeah, that putting something up your ass makes you gay. Like, what the fuck? I don't know what people are thinking, that like there's a switch up your ass somewhere that if you poke it, it instantly turns you gay and there's no turning it off. Like, I don't know what people are thinking. If I'm not feeling like I've got the energetic capacity to have those conversations, I just tell people to grow up, and your prostate doesn't have a gender. Your prostate doesn't have a sexuality. It's a fucking gland, and it doesn't mean anything if you like it being stimulated or not. Anal sex is not the domain of gay men. Like, there's just it just boggles my mind that like people have this idea. I just don't get it. So if I'm being blunt, I'll just tell people to get over it. But if I'm being a bit more compassionate and I want to be a bit more understanding, then I'll talk about internalized homophobia and how we can unpack it. And that's a process as well. Like, it's a process I had to go through. I'm a big advocate for prostate play and anal stimulation. I think it's really important for every man to explore it and experience it, because it makes you a better lover, in my personal opinion. If you are always penetrating and you've never been penetrated, then you don't know what it's like to be your partner. Essentially, you don't know what it's like to be penetrated like they are, and so you can't empathize with them. You don't have the experience, or you can't relate to their experience. So by being penetrated, you become a better penetrator, and there's a whole bunch more. You can have multiple orgasms through prostate orgasms. It's really good for your health. Prostate massage. There's heaps. You can de-armor your asshole as well. So releasing tension, it's really beneficial for that as well. Like getting a knot of tension released from your shoulder by getting a massage. You can do the same thing internally in your ass. There's some people that like to say that, releasing tension from that area makes your penis longer as well, because of all the tension that's held. It kind of retracts the spongeous tissue in the penis. So, there's people that are claiming that, releasing tension can make your penis bigger. So there's just a whole bunch of like really beneficial reasons for exploring that area of your body. I could speak for another hour.
I know.
In fact, I have many times. But those that like if I'm just shotgunning it, that's my top reasons why I think it's really important.
Yeah. And I love that you just spewed out so many facts about prostate play and all of its benefits. So I think even somebody listening to that, they can definitely do some further research on prostate play if that's something that they're interested in. But I thought that was an important one for us to kind of talk about on this episode today. So yeah, as we're kind of wrapping up, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you're dying to share on this episode, or any just final takeaways?
like something that I like to share is curiosity is the cornerstone of like of a lot of the work that I do. Right, I really think it's important to foster and cultivate your curiosity, and with that comes some playfulness and comes some lightheartedness. And I mean, the reason why I think it's important is because our sex life and our sexuality changes over the course of our life, I suppose. And it's if we're not curious, then we kind of get stuck in a rut, and we get stuck in doing things the same way, and so we take masturbation for example. We find one way of masturbating, and then we just do that for the rest of our life. If we're not curious about things, if we don't want to, if we don't foster that in ourselves, to be exploratory and to expand upon our experiences, it becomes dull and boring, and it's kind of the reason why there's this, I guess, like narrative in society that your sex life dies when you get married. Right? It's because we're not fostering curiosity. We're not being curious about a partner, how their body changes, how our body changes, how our experience of pleasure changes over the course of our life and over the course of our partner's life as well. So I think it's really a cornerstone of a healthy sex life is curiosity. And that then leads to variety and a whole bunch of other things, which I'm a big advocate for in terms of like principles of a healthy sex life. But curiosity is the cornerstone, I feel.
I love that. And then with working with sex coaches and things, we know the things, right? I often find that with people that I work with, they know that they want something more, but they don't know how to even start to figure out what more is. And so being able to work with coaches and things like that. And I love in the beginning too, you said that, the therapy or the clinical background, there's only so much that you can do. And us as coaches, we have this overflowing abundance of resources and techniques that we can share with people. There's so much value in the work that you're doing, that we're both doing. And I appreciate you so much coming on today and talking about all these things. I know I'm going to get a lot of DMs after this and people loving this episode. And I'm sure, people will reach out and find you on social too. Which again, share if you don't mind how people can find you or if they're interested in working with you.
Yeah, well, I guess firstly, thank you so much for inviting me on and having these conversations. I think they're super important and just really humbled that you're using your platform to help me spread my message as well. So thank you for that. And my, I guess the easiest way to get in contact with me would be like via Instagram, which is at the Cam Fraser. I'm actually at the Cam Fraser on all social media platforms, which I've got to start saying more, not just Instagram. But at the Cam Fraser, and then also my website, which is cam-fraser.com. And I feel like this is necessary to say because in America, my last name often gets spelled wrong and people can't find me. But that's Fraser. There's no I in there. There's no Z in there. It's Fraser, just for the Americans that are listening.
Perfect. And yes, we'll make sure to link that in the show notes for them. They can easily find you. And of course, we'll share all the assets on social media and stuff. So you will just be a click away for people to find you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. I appreciate you. And I again, just value you so much in the work that you're doing. So keep doing the damn thing. Keep changing people's lives through prostate play, please.
And I appreciate it. Thank you for your kind words.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a thing. And if you loved it so fucking much, be sure to leave a 5-star review. I'll see you next week, and until then, keep owning your sexual self.